morning. So I am Jamie Franco-Zamudio. I am the co-chair of the Teaching and Mentoring Committee for SPSSI, and it is a fabulous committee to be on, just to let you know. And what we try and do is that we include as many people as possible. I don't know if you were here in the session beforehand, but we had about 45 people interested in discussing teaching strategies. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is highlight our identity also as instructors, professors, lecturers, and teachers. So we have a few awards that were added under Kim Case's tutelage, if you know her, and those are the Innovative Teaching Award, the Outstanding Mentoring and Teaching Award, and then the National Institutes for the Teaching of Psychology Speaker Award, where SPSSI sends a member to discuss how they teach, teaching strategies, activities to a larger audience of people who study and teach psychology. And then we added last year, my co-chair Selena Brody and I added the Teaching Resources Prize. And the goal is to get as many activities, web links, syllabi listed on the SPSSI teaching web pages so that we could share our knowledge, and it would be a really great spot for you to go to when you're teaching a new class or want to know how to beef up what you're already doing in classes. So I encourage you to apply for these awards. Today we are so fortunate to have 3 people who are award winners speaking to us, and I also encourage you to join the committees that give out these awards, which is kind of wonderful. So first I wanted to acknowledge that we have some of our committee members here today. So if you are here, stand up. The subcommittee members who chose the Outstanding Teaching and Mentoring Award were Moshe Landsman, Janice Yoder, yay! Oh, you're Donald Saucier, Danielle Dickens. Those who have selected the Innovative Teaching Award were Lorraine Gutierrez, Adrian Carter-Soul, Joe Miles, who's also here standing, hello, Kathy Olson, and then for the NITOP is what we call it, the National Institute for the Teaching of Psychology, that was Eden Renee Hayes, Leah Warner, Joel Nadler, Peter Levitt. And then for the Teaching Resources Prize, we have Erin Ellison, Sarah Herman, and Diane Hall. And we just wanted to acknowledge all of the hard work that you've done, and thank you. So let's give them that. So we wanted to, before we get into our talks, announce some of the winners this year and provide them with their plaques or certificates. And so recognition goes to the Outstanding Teaching Award co-recipients, Phia Salter and Lauren Catania. And you can come up here. And I'm guessing that there's going to be a photo. Yeah. Congratulations. The recipient of the Innovative Teaching Award is Selena Brody. A little awkward, but they good. Thank you. We have an Innovative Teaching Award honorable mention, and that is Eileen Zerbruggen. And if anyone is here who is a student of Eileen's or wants to accept it on her behalf, we'd welcome you. Then we shall mail it to her. And then we have the National Institute for Teaching of Psychology Speaker Award, and this year it goes to Laura Dryjanska. Congratulations. Oh gosh, okay, in 1 second, because I'm going to do something that really is going to embarrass you. And so to embarrass her further, last year what we decided is that we wanted to add a small grant for people who are interested in getting teachers, professors, community members, students together to discuss issues related to the teaching of psychology or disseminate information in areas of social justice or social issues in psychology. And so Laura is our first recipient of this, and her work is really phenomenal, and I'm hoping she'll share it with us on the website a little pressure. But her work, she got together 2 working groups on human trafficking. It was international, community-based, student-based as well. So congratulations. We have some recipients for the Teaching Resources Prize. And if the members of the committee that chose the Teaching Resources Prize would come up, that would be really great to give them to them. Hopefully they are here. But this is a new committee as well, and we're really excited that we were able to offer this. So the first person, and this is Sarah and Diane and Aaron. The first person is Nyasha Grayman Simpson. Are you here today? Well, congratulations. Natalie Savick. She's in session right now. Lindsay Phillips. Alyssa Call. And Alexandra or Alex Rutherford. Her student is accepting on her behalf. So.
We'll send her this.
Can you all?
And thank you to all of the people who selected the award winners, and congratulations to all of them.
And she's good.
You okay, Diane?
What was that, like a 9.8?
I'm worried about that. Sorry about that. I didn't.
Okay, and so we are going to now bring up our first speaker. And who is introducing Phia? Oh, it's here.
It is my pleasure to introduce Phia Salter. She's an associate professor of psychology and Africana studies at Texas A&M University. She earned her BS in psychology with a concentration in ethnic studies from Davidson College in 2005 and her PhD in social psychology with a graduate certificate in African studies from the University of Kansas in 2010. Dr. Salter utilizes cultural, psychological, and critical race perspectives to inform her work on collective memory, social identity, and systemic racism. Her research lab, the Culture in Mind Research Collaboratory, is a community of faculty, graduate students, and undergraduate students who utilize psychological science to conduct innovative research with the goal of alleviating social inequalities and injustice. Dr. Salter is dedicated to social justice initiatives for teaching and learning. In the classroom, her primary goal is to facilitate dialogue and action that empowers students to identify, challenge, and dismantle various forms of oppression and injustice. Please join me in welcoming Phia Salter.
Thank you so much. As some of you know, I have double booked, and so unfortunately after I tell you a little bit about what I do in the classroom, I'll be running out. But it's not for lack of interest or sort of, well, not for lack of interest. And I really want to thank my, a graduate student and an undergraduate wrote letters of nomination for me. They've been to SPSSI before. They couldn't be here this year, but it really meant a lot to me because I got to see what some of the things that they said. And part of the impact is that they too want to go on and study and teach about social justice in a way that's impactful. So the title of my talk, brief talk, is Identify, Challenge, and Dismantle a Few Sociocultural Strategies for Teaching About Racism. So today I will be giving you just one example of an activity that I do. And before I talk about that, I just wanted to give a little bit about my personal background. Being trained in both psychology and Africana studies, and that really informs my research, service, and teaching. And so I know sometimes being at a research-intensive institution, the teaching can kind of get pushed aside, or folks will advise you to sort of take shortcuts so that you can make sure that your research is up and running and good. But when you research things like social inequality or racism, and you know you're going to a classroom, half-assing it there doesn't feel quite right. So, as being jointly appointed in psychology and Africana studies, the courses that I teach are often cross-listed in both places. So, Black psychology, psychology of culture and diversity, self and identity, psych of intergroup relations, and then Africana theory and methods. In many of these cases, I have a mix of students who come in with different sorts of interests and different sorts of skills. And so what I try to focus on is giving them the analytic tool to sort of identify where racism might be sort of lurking and how to understand it and then challenge it. So the courses that I teach are also meet a criteria at our university for international culture and diversity listing. So our students have to take at least 2 of these courses during their time at A&M, and they can take them in several different departments. And the idea is that our students, after coming out of these courses, will be better equipped to live and work effectively in a diverse and global society, articulate the value of a diverse and global perspective, and recognize diverse opinions and practices. And for me, while those are all laudable goals, they really kind of map onto let's learn about our differences and all get along. And that's okay, but in order to sort of think about challenging and pushing forward anti-racist agendas, sometimes you need to feel uncomfortable, and it's not all kumbaya. And this is also informed by my training, having a cultural psychology framework and perspective that yes, documenting and thinking about diversity is important, but that can be sort of surface level and can end up essentializing different groups. And so really we want to understand the cultural and historical bases of mind and belief, thoughts, and behavior. And so one of the things that I do is that I discuss with my students a cultural psychology approach. And this happens both in the Black psychology class and the Psych of Culture and Diversity class, but I'm going to focus on the Black psychology class for a moment. In the Black psychology class, people self-select into that course for their ICD credits, and they tell me that at the end of the class they're surprised because they really thought that I would just kind of teach them what it means to be Black, and that is a component of it, but in order to have a cultural psychological frame, it's not just about placing the lens on Black people and say, hey, look at all the interesting things they do. There's also an element where we really need to turn the lens and also look at the majority group to understand how those dynamics work and denormalize some of the invisible patterns that are informing their behaviors as well. And so in a Black psychology class, many of the students aren't coming in and expecting to do that, but then at the end, they appreciate it. And so the 2 steps are drawn from a research paper that I worked on with Glenn Adams a while ago. And so the first step is to provide a culturally grounded explanation. So this usually starts with perhaps a statement or an idea that is inherently or implicitly sort of pathologizing of a group. So in that paper, we had 3 different examples, but one included sort of the vaccine tampering involved perceptions of vaccines having been tampered in Nigeria. And so people were refusing to take those vaccinations for polio, and then ultimately it started to respread. But the CDC and sort of UN agencies sort of just looked at it like, why can't these people just, take a vaccine? And so understanding the historical context in which, well, there are documented incidences of racism that drug companies would administer sort of medicine in which some people got actual medicine and other people got controls. And, there have been documented cases of sort of payments for unethical practices. So in that context, there's a reason why people may be suspicious of vaccine tampering. And to turn the lens, to also think about, so why is it that those agencies or science goes into these spaces blind to that history? Why don't they know, or why aren't they acknowledging that context? And so turning the lens, the sort of second step, is challenging assumptions of normal or practices or beliefs of it's just the way it is. So with my students and sort of in lecture, but then also ultimately essay questions, it's fun to be at a research institution and give your students open-ended essay questions instead of all just multiple choice. But, so for example, after a lesson on Black family structure, they might read a quote from a sociologist, Moynihan, who's, in the 60s and 70s said, "The Negro community has been forced into a matriarchal structure which, because it is so out of line with the rest of American society, seriously retards the progress of the group as a whole, and imposing a crushing burden on the Negro male, and in consequence, on a great many Negro women as well." So, they're given this prompt and asked to reply with a cultural analysis, right? So in the first step, they could talk about some of the cultural and historical grounding of families being separated within our American history. They could also talk about a diversity of family structures that are found in many spaces in Africa, right? Both matrilineal and patrilineal lines, and that's perfectly normal and fine. And then sort of to turn the lens, they can talk about, okay, so, families in the U.S. aren't just as, they're also informed by patriarchal structure, and what are the consequences of that structure on on American families in life, right? So doing both. Another example has to do with a lesson on cognition and language, where we actually go through some of the rules and applications and how African American vernacular English, or Ebonics, developed. And so they, again, might receive this prompt. I guess what I'd like to say is that what makes me feel that Blacks tend to be ignorant is that they fail to see that the word is spelled A-S-K, not A-X. And when they say asked, which is actually how I say it, it gives the sentence an entirely different meaning, and that is what I feel holds Blacks back. And so I wanted to read one of the responses to this prompt. Okay, so they had 3 that they could choose from, and they chose this prompt. The first step in a cultural analysis is to provide a culturally grounded explanation of behavior or attitude discussed. This step makes the author of the cultural analysis consider potential reasons for the advantages of performing the behavior being discussed. The next step is to turn the lens. To turn the lens means to question why the person is questioning or discussing the behaviors and thoughts of an outgroup, and why they believe the things that they do. Oh, okay. And then they go on to then apply the steps. Despite criticism from many members of the white community, Black speech or Ebonics has a rich cultural history that provides advantages for the members of the Black community that utilize it. Ebonics has its roots as a combination of African languages and English that has evolved over time and continues to evolve today. Through Ebonics, members of the Black community are able to have a connection through language to the African continent and are able to share a unique dialect of English that better allows them to be creative and convey things such as actions that occurred in the remote completed past. Also, this very specific mechanism that may otherwise go unnoticed or seem unnatural using standard English. Okay, so then they turn the lens and they say, if someone were to criticize the use of Ebonics, it would serve them well to consider that different dialects of English are spoken throughout the USA, as well as the world. So why is Ebonics so often considered improper? There are many dialects in the US that have connections to European languages, yet these dialects are rarely, if ever, claimed to be improper or incorrect. And when Americans make up words, no one questions it. Emoji is not a real thing. So, in the essence of time, that's all I have for you today. But I wanted to convey that, in a course like Black Psychology, it's not just about, giving people ways to appreciate or celebrate African American heritage, or sort of this celebratory aspect, but also a critical analysis of the dynamics that are informing why African Americans may have a certain status today is important too. And so I try to integrate that into my class. Thank you.